to Dial Information with your host, Gage Robert Ryan.
Welcome to another edition of Dial Information, your number one source for everything that is dark, occulted, and sleazy, broadcasting live out of beautiful Los Angeles, California, in the back door of Hollywood, where all of the occult hides out, right? Maybe so, maybe not. We'll find out as time goes on, but the more and more I see around me, the more and more I see that, like anything in life, it's dualistic. We have tremendous good here. We have tremendous bad here. I've seen both. You can judge that for yourself. In the meantime, Hollywood is mourning the loss of Andrew Getty. He died at 47 years of age. He is the grandson of tycoon J. Paul Getty, who, at his death in 1976, was the richest man in the world. He's also who the J. Paul Getty Museum and the Getty Foundation and everything else, for that matter, are named after, and was certainly a prominent Freemason, J. Paul Getty, that is, who was good friends with William Randolph Hearst, another one of the, I suppose you could say, fathers of modern Southern California and how they developed it and so forth. But anyway, he was known to be very reclusive. Andrew, the grandson, found dead in his home. Police are investigating. I don't know much more beyond that, but I'm sure those details will emerge, as it is certainly a high-profile case. In the meantime, the rest of the country, in America that is buzzing about the state of Indiana and the state of Arkansas and these religious freedom laws and things which may or may not discriminate against gays and so forth. And I don't know, I've been watching this stuff, and it seems to me that, first of all, Indiana and Arkansas both are states that really don't even register as far as whatever they think or say or do politically. The ones that dominate that here are more like California, Texas, of course, New York, places like that. But to see these things happening in the news, it always makes me stop and ask myself, if this is all they're talking about in our news over here, then who did America go and bomb today? That's always my question. I don't know why we keep hearing about this gay stuff over and over and over again. I am a gay man, and I don't understand it. It's in the news all the time. I mean, are we preparing for an American gay civil war? I'm not quite sure, because again, I guess I've missed some memos of the satanic Hollywood gay agenda or something that we're accused of promoting, and now I guess I'm a part of that accusation or something. I don't know. It's so stupid. The whole thing is so stupid. It has to do with people being involved in other people's business, which they shouldn't be in the first place. And it is, I'm afraid, that simple. So, here we go again with more of the usual mindless, cacophonous, pointless, political chatter that ultimately accomplishes not very much. So, we'll see. Other than that, it's been a pretty slow news week, and I wouldn't drone on with the news anyway, because I have a most compelling interview for you today. My special guest today is Gordon Bowden, who is an ex-Royal Air Force General Technician GSE engineer, as well as having worked for the gold fields of South Africa mining as an engineer and HVAC and refrigeration engineer. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, James.
So I know that that's just a very brief introduction to your long list of credits. We were put in touch by a mutual friend. If you would go ahead and give us the rest of your resume you were telling me about.
Yes, I joined the Air Force just before I was 18, 1969, and then progressed through the trade qualifications and examinations, and then progressed up through the ranks to a non-commissioned officer. And throughout that, I was stationed at units and bases, frontline bases throughout the world. I did stationed in Cyprus, did detachments to the Persian Gulf, Malta, Gibraltar, and then stationed in Germany on a frontline unit called RAF Larbrook for 3 years, and then posted on promotion back to the United Kingdom, where I took over working with the Americans at RAF Brodie, which was belonging to also a front for SOSA, which was the American NAVAC facility, who were there listening to Russian submarines coming out of the Baltic, tracking and tracing them with hundreds of miles worth of microphone cables scattered all over the north end of Scotland and beyond.
Okay, so now we're into the intelligence community now.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's quite a decorated past. So my hat's off to you with your accomplishments, sir. That's quite something. Now, the reason a mutual friend put us in contact is because you evidently have some things to say about Freemasonry and how it ties into the things you've experienced in your background and so forth. So let's just, start where you'd like and take us down this journey that you've been on, and we'll start to explore what you learned.
Yes, the common friend of mine, David Veach, has put me in touch with you as an introduction to some of the material that I've uncovered over the last 14 years. And that was my main expertise lies within dismantling fake oil, gas and mining companies that steal hundreds of billions of pounds and dollars. And they are interconnected on various stock exchanges, especially the Toronto Stock Exchange venture and the Australian Stock Exchange, the ASX, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and the London AIM alternative investment market. And I have found that there is a very large, I would say massive syndicate of interconnected individuals who have dual listed companies on the Toronto Stock Exchange, operating in America, Australia, Canada, and the United Kingdom, in Germany, who launch small startup companies on these stock exchanges, where the only requisition is that they have a website and an alternative, what they call an AIM Rule 26 admission to trade document, which can be up to 600 pages. And those directors who front those companies launch the companies in order to float shares on stock exchange, what they call penny stock.
Would you say that the majority of these companies are classified as what we refer to over here in America as 501c3 nonprofit?
No. These are genuine investor-style companies.
Okay.
Which, unless you have the experience in mining or oil and gas, it would just be something out of your skill bracket to understand how you can, with a basic website, which can be operated via GoDaddy or another simple website structure, and then be able to float billions of pounds worth of shares to raise cash for the company. And this is what has been happening within my research over the last 14 years, is that these companies, which are virtual companies, which have an elaborate website and a video presentation of somebody standing in a vast tract of land in a jungle with a set of geological chipping hammers and a trench dug in a pile of dirt, which they then expose as being a mining claim which they've purchased as an undervalued asset, or an old defunct mine, which is a care and maintenance property, or an abandoned site, or a flooded quarry. And then they use these to raise funds for that startup company by the flotation of shares in a public listed company. And I'm talking 5 companies in the Falkland Islands, which raised over £1 billion.
Yes, I think that you and I and everybody that's listening are all in agreement that there is a very, very serious problem with the cartel-type banking activity that's fraudulent and that is going on under this scope. Now, let me ask: are you able to name some of these companies?
Oh yes, yeah. I've named them in weblog articles that I was the material provider for. That when I've looked at the corporate structuring of a company called Desire Petroleum, I did through corporate dismantlement that it was linked to he's now late Labour MP, and the whole family were involved in this startup company called Desire Petroleum. And like all the other companies that operated in the Falklands, like Falkland Oil and Gas, Border and Southern Exploration, and Argus Exploration, all these companies are nothing more than shell companies where the directors conspire to steal the cash and the shares of that company by laundering it to other companies to which they are also directors of. And that's corporate espionage, because those companies are only structured as conduits. Do you get what I'm trying to say?
Correct. I'm following.
I tried to keep it as simple. Is that it's very easy for a group of controlling directors to steal the cash of a company if they do so by moving the money to subsidiaries, which they lend the money. Like I would lend a company, a subsidiary company, to which I'm also a director of, in another country or out of the jurisdiction of the Financial Services Authority, say in the British Virgin Islands, or where the other subsidiary company is registered to. I lend them $20 million as a loan. And then over a period of 2 years, that company collapses and the money is written off as a toxic debt to the parental company.
Yes. No, I'm actually, most people don't know this about me, but I'm actually quite familiar with British law. I'm on the board of directors of a company in the UK, so I'm quite familiar with dealing with Companies House and
Yes.
the Parliament and the EU where we were registered
Yes.
under and everything. So, yeah, I'm completely following you on, so, yeah.
Yeah, so the unfortunate thing is that if you, for the people who are floating these companies, if you have a basic notebook and a pencil, if you jotted down the corporate structuring of 3 or 4 of these companies that I have named, and I've named over 1,300 in articles, is that when you look at the common directors and you identify through the admission to trade document, that which also lists additional information about the directors, what it does is it throws out each company that director over a certain period when he was employed by that company, and over a certain period when he resigned, or when he and his co-directors. And so when you jot down how many companies that these directors are taking a salary from, sometimes they've got 600 companies, which is a physical impossibility. When it comes to investor shareholders having value for that director taking a salary, because it's impossible.
Right,
and that's
it's
what I
more
uncovered.
numbers in a computer than, yes, exactly.
Yeah. And so when I identified the basic fraud network, which I call the syndicate, when I identified that back in 2001, 2002, what I started to do then was compile a library. And that library is extended now to where it is today, which is massive. It's not only just hard copy downloaded, it's also replicated in portable hard drives and held by others for safekeeping, because I'm trying to pee on a big parade.
Yes, no, that's actually my exact identical methodology with my information, so we're on the same page there. I completely understand.
Yeah. So if you've had dealings with the London Stock Exchange and Companies House, what you will know is that when these companies float on the alternative investment market, which is an unregulated subsection of the London Stock Exchange, these companies have to file certain documents, and those documents can be used in a court of law for their own prosecution, because what it does do, unfortunately for these people, is it lists the full prosecution material required, because it lists the substructures, the lawyers, the accountants, the auditors, the market managers. It lists all those people nicely indexed that if you wanted to do a recovery of proceeds of crime, it's all laid out for them. And all it would take is not very competent recovery system of police officers and a forensic accountant to be able to grab the money back, because it's laid out in the documents.
Yes, I've been in a similar situation, although I found that I ran into many blockades with the police and Companies House both, because the subject matter in the company in particular, that is, I won't get into the details because it's not related to this, but the point is that there was a lot of red tape and there was a lot of political reasons why they did not want to explore the crime that had occurred within the company that I was pushing to have investigated. And so, because too prominent of names were going to come up in the audit of which you speak.
Exactly. James, this is what I found, is that many of the boards of directors include members of the House of Lords, MPs of various parties, and even extending to the Canadian ex-Prime Minister. And the Australian
or members of the Order of the Garter, or members of Ladies Who Lunch.
That's correct. And so what you have is a network of grandees and people who hold high positions of power within various governments, and I include the American government as well. People won't understand where Bill Clinton got $31 million from a guy called Frank Giustra, who operated on the Toronto Stock Exchange for his re-election campaign. $31 million. Now, where did that money come from? It came from these fake oil, gas, and mining companies that are registered on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And this is how I found it a duty of care for myself to try my best to expose these people for what they are. These people are not fit to hold public office. They should all be sticking their hands through a set of bars for their bread and water.
Oh, yes, our politicians here in America currently this week or so, above and beyond the normal level of out of control that they're at, they're so in overdrive with out of control this week that it's just... I mean, I can't even watch the news right now. It's just too much to process, the way that our politicians are over meddling with this and botching up these negotiations and saying these asinine statements over here and trying and bringing up this gay and that religious, and it's all so much theatrics that because I have my background in education is in technical theater, so the mechanics of staging a show I'm completely aware of, and that's exactly what they do. So that's
it's a play in the making, but understanding human psychology and understanding how you can manipulate to anybody a thought pattern as to what you're actually doing, and to hide that and be able to have that acting ability, even when you stand up to give public address, is to identify that these people are very well versed at standing up in front of a mass audience. And to give a company, a fake oil, gas, and mining company, a semblance of respectability, that's why they induct members of Parliament and members of the House of Lords to act as non-executive directors. Because any member of the public say, well, it must be an honest company. Look, there's Lord so-and-so in it. And there's an MP who is also supposedly working for his constituents.
I've always looked at it like this, especially with the oil and gas. I grew up, I'm native to Dallas, Texas. And yes, if I may say, growing up in the 1980s, it was a lot like the way it was portrayed on the original soap opera. And it seemed to me that it was common knowledge of the public back then that these dirty... Because you always had J.R. Ewing running around and setting up these dummy corporations to F over his competition and all of these antics and dirty and paid off police officers and all of this. And even though it was fiction, it was all, I know as a Dallasite, that it was based on real characters that were alive and well there in the city. Several of which my family knew. And so to me, I don't understand how the people have lost touch with this being the reality of the situation.
Well, you're quite right, James. Is that you're looking at theatrics on an industrial scale, where when we talked about how did I find out that Masonic lodges were involved, it was quite simple. It was when I traced some of the mining companies and fake oil and gas companies, I checked some of the directors and their addresses and to where these companies were registered. And sometimes they were quite blatant in their ability and offering bravado to laughing at the public by operating out of Masonic lodges. By checking the addresses of the registration,
Which, if I may interject briefly, I once held a position in my lodge called Junior Warden, which, for those that don't know, is basically the lawyer or the barrister of the lodge. So you have to know Masonic law, which is very lengthy, backward and forward, and blah blah blah. And let me tell you how Masonically illegal, by their own rules, that is. But it goes on, you're right. So anyway, I'm sorry, continue.
No, it's just that when you're looking at the protective mechanisms to be able to shield organized crime systems, you have to have, including corrupted police officers, senior police officers, even junior police officers, who will look at taking reports from victims and then turning a blind eye to noting where it continues into constructing interconnected companies where the money has been passed to. And as soon as you start to involve politicians, like I think your President George Bush, unless your listeners would know that when he started a company, an oil exploration company, do you know anything about that?
I know several. Well, when he moved back to Dallas, he moved down off Park Lane, right down the street from my aunt's house, and they cordoned off the entire cul-de-sac with the Secret Service and everything, and it really irritated the entire neighborhood. That was right before I moved out of Dallas, so I know several things about stories growing up about the Bush family that would probably shock some people, but yeah,
that's correct. And the reason
the cocaine, the involuntary manslaughter, the DUIs, yes, I know.
Yeah, so the reason I came across that was because I mentioned the 5 companies that were operating in the Falklands, and they were using an oil rig that was previously owned by George and Jeb Bush under Zapata Oil Corporation. And if you know anything about Operation Zapata, which was the Bay of Pigs operation, you getting any closer?
Yes, Newsweek magazine just published an article not 2 weeks ago about the Freemason orchestration of the Bay of Pigs. It was a very compelling. I was shocked that Newsweek magazine did this article.
Yeah, because the semi-submersible oil rig used for the 5 companies, one has since delisted. Desire Petroleum has delisted after I named them as being a fake company. Was the Ocean Guardian was a semi-submersible, and when you check the history of the Ocean Guardian, it goes all the way back to George and Jeb Bush operating Zapata Oil Corporation under a pseudonym for another company. However, my interest didn't just extend to the involvement of those, but also where George Bush and a guy called Mohammed Adnan Khashoggi were the founding advisors for a company called Barrick Gold Corporation.
The Khashoggi family is very prominent for the Americans who've never heard that name before. I've heard it in Europe. Yes, I know who you're talking about.
He's a covert arms trader, and he was dealing arms to Iraq and to Iran, and that's what links in also to the Bay of Pigs, etc. And so what you looked at is the ability for intelligence services to use covert black ops money laundering fronts to then utilize those fake companies, not only for arming despot African leaders, but also using them to fund those despot leaders by money laundering conduits through the companies I've so named within my research. Is that once you identify a common boiler room where multiple companies operate out of there, which when you check all the documentation, they're all interlinked, means that they're dealing with each other by virtue of loans or cross-referencing or joint venture partners. You get a basic understanding of how involved organized crime is when the little people who get arrested for urinating in the street or basic shoplifting or, drunk and disorderly.
Well, it's as basic as this. One good example that I would like to cite is, a lot of people, when you talk about the Diana thing, they say, "Oh, Diana was attacking the royals," and this, that. Well, no, it was so much more complex than that. What she was actually doing, especially with the Halo Trust and her landmine campaign and everything, she was attacking those defense contractors and oil and gas companies, and she was attacking their pocketbooks. That was the real reason why.
Do you want me to name names?
Yes, please.
Well, because obviously,
that's what we do. The tagline of Dial Information, the show you're on, is guaranteed outrage in Hollywood. So I aim to be true to that tagline.
Okay, now I'm going to give you specific references to my research, which started in about 2006, to these people that operate the Lonro mechanisms, which are the controlling arms of despot African countries, including what's his name in Rhodesia, or Zimbabwe as they call it now.
I can't think of it myself at the moment either, but I know the
Robert Mugabe.
Yes, yes,
Sir Robert Mugabe. Sir. Yeah, knighted by the Queen.
It's always a sir, isn't it?
Mass murderer, knighted by the Queen.
I want to quickly clarify. Not all sirs are bad, but some of them are, and that's
depends who they're money fronting for. But anyway, that's by the by. Now, you might not know this, but I was tracing various companies that were operating out of a specific boiler room in the City of London, and that address was 22 Arlington Street, London, SW1A1RD. And that address was the front for a company called Lonro PLC, which links back to the fight with Tiny Rowlands and Mohammed Al-Fayed, who is linked to Dodi Fayed and Diana.
Correct.
Now, unbeknown to yourself and the rest of your listeners, is that when I started to dismantle the companies that were operating out of there, the fake oil, gas and mining companies like Lenny Gas and Oil, Falklands Oil and Gas, Vatakula Gold Mines, all these fake companies that I was investigating by virtue of linking common directors to organized crime and money laundering, what I came across was a company called Arlington Associates Limited. And they had a website on which they declared that the directors were Jeffrey White, Ambassador Francis D. Cook, especially significant to America, and Brigadier Aldwin James Glendining Wright, and another gentleman called Mark Blagborough. Now, many people wouldn't have no idea who Ambassador Francis D. Cook is, but you can check just by using a corporate search on who this woman is. You will see she's so closely associated with hierarchy within the American government, and having been the ambassador to Oman, which plays a significant part in when you talk about Sir Mark Thatcher and covert arms trading, including aircraft, to the Saudi government, to anywhere in the Gulf states. However, my research showed me that these people, including Ambassador Francis D. Cook, also controlled a corporate entity called Alient Tech Systems. And Alient Tech Systems was a weapons production company in America. Now, I confronted the Lonro directors with correspondence, which are legal communications for reuse in a court of law, that Miss Ambassador Francis D. Cook was previously involved in a company called Oryx Natural Resources, which was named by the BBC as having a shareholder who was linked to Al Qaeda. Now, if anybody can remember the lovely photographs of Diana wearing a tabard with the Hallow Trust on in an Angolan minefield with a head cover shield, very few people will know that Aldwyn James Glendinning Wright was also a director of the Hallow Trust. Hence my understanding that when I looked at Arlington Associates Limited and its corporate entities, that when I checked, it operated and was birthed out of in Hereford, which was the covert structuring for ex-SAS officers conducting black ops. And now in the website, which I took full corporate information of, I made sure I had many hard copies of to prove it if they ever took me to court, was that in the corporate structuring in Companies House, there was certain misleading information as into the spelling of those directors' names. And that's a common way that they get around the technicalities in a court of law. Do you understand that?
Oh, yes.
But by
they will
misspelling,
blatantly just use aliases as well.
That's correct. That's correct. And what I uncovered, and I confronted them, because the website for Arlington Associates Limited actually says that they were sponsored by and affiliated to Lonhro. Now, Lonhro never had a good name because even Ted Heath, the late Prime Minister, called them the most unpleasant and unacceptable face of capitalism. And he was quite right, although he was not a good man himself in view of corruption and other nefarious activities said to involve little children. But that's not my expertise, and I won't comment on that. However, there are references to his involvement with the disappearance of many children who were...
Yes, as many other guests of my show have brought forward their information, yes, those same rings, child trafficking, sex trafficking, whatever rings, they are associated with these environments. That is absolutely the truth of it, yes.
And it is my firm belief as an ex-Royal Air Force engineer is that they played a greater part in the death of Diana. She's very special to myself because I'm from Wales myself. And I did meet her at our Royal Air Force base at RAF Brodie.
Wow, that's quite something.
Yeah, well, I used to do the airfield arresting systems, the rotary hydraulic arresting gear, which is the same catch cable that they use on an aircraft carrier, but on a static runway, and also the Mark V and Mark VI airfield arresting barriers, aircraft arresting barriers, which are on either side of the runway. Do you understand that? That when an aircraft comes in with no hydraulics or takes off and has a power failure, instead of crashing into further distances, they have a catch net at the end of the runway, which is operated either manually or by the air traffic control tower when it's called for in a pan call. And so I'd finished doing the DI on the airfield, and I was let off 1 hour early, and I went home, and as their convoy, Prince Charles and Lady Diana and its escort entourage was coming up the coastal road, I'd pulled my car over and I took my camera with a 300mm telephoto lens and started taking a sequence of shots as the cortege of cars came up the hill. And as the car drew alongside, I dropped the camera down and saluted the car because it was carrying the royal pennant. She leaned across Prince Charles and blew a kiss to me. And and he dragged her back to her side of the seat. Now, and that will stay with me for the rest of my life. Is that
I would imagine connection. So. That story alone will stay with me. Yeah,
I was the only person there. It was in a lay-by on Newgale Beach on the uprise coming from RAF Brodie, and so that stuck with my mind when I heard something woke me up in bed in South Africa in the early hours of the morning when it was said that it was a news flash. Something strangely woke me up, and there was this news flash on the TV, which we'd left on, which said that she died in a car accident. And automatically my memories drifted back to that particular occasion. And then through my investigations later on, I found out that when she was wearing that Hallow Trust tabard, the links to Dodi Fayad and Mohammed Al Fayad and the uncle, who was Mohammed Adnan Khashoggi, with the arms trading, left a bitter taste in my mouth as to the reason she may have been bumped off. And that was that Dodi Fayad would have been told by his father, Al Fayad, that that Ambassador Francis D. Cook was running a arms company or senior board of directors of Alien Tech Systems. Do you understand? That was selling mines. And now here's a woman that's wearing a tabard to recover donations to stop mine's indiscriminate killing of people. And yet the very person who she's wearing a tabard for is working with Ambassador Francis D. Cook. And that was Brigadier Aldwyn James Glendining Wright.
I think that further solidifies just how much of a tragedy story that her life was. It seemed she was always surrounded, it seemed, by people who were constantly manipulating her and taking advantage of her and abusing her, and it's very. I mean, she's a distant cousin of mine, so it's heartbreaking.
Well, it's sad, and say what that made me dig not just into the interrelationship between Lonro directors, which were very top-heavy Conservative Party members. I'm talking the top end. Is that there is a filth in my country, to which I put a uniform on for, and that filth needs to be expunged. It needs to be removed, and we need to have decent people who have the interest of its people as its prime, not just for lining the pockets of their mates, whether they be in India or the Gulf states. And I think we are all very naive as to the depth of corruption that exists within our government. And I'm trying in my little way to expose who they are. That's all I'm trying to...
I don't want to say something that could be perceived as insulting to an ex-RAF, but I think ultimately a large portion of the current problem would be Her Majesty.
That borders on treason. If I was to say that,
you don't have to respond to that. That's my American foul mouth.
Look, but no, it's not a foul mouth. It's something that's carried by the views of very many people in this country. Is that people don't understand the mechanisms of where money gets moved and for who. And when it's brought to light, even when you're talking about David Cameron, very few people, and Tony Blair. I mean, there was a great blow-up, but it only lasted a couple of days, of Tony Blair's involvement with a company called UI Energy, which was launched by a group of South Korean con artists and ex-fraudsters and people involved with corruption. And what they had is they were starting a company which would have oil rights in northern Iraq shortly after the Iraq War. And the people that they included as paid advisors were Tony Blair and Bob Hawke, the ex-Australian Prime Minister, and many members of the Bush administration. Now, if you're talking about were the wars in Iraq about oil, here's a prime example. Do you understand that? Is that they were given exploration rights on certain tracts of land in northern Iraq.
Right, but it's not limited to just that. That's just one of the spoils of why they're over there. And my knowledge of it is what they are more these elite circles of which we're speaking. What they would be more interested in getting their hands on over there are more of the archaeological type of things, shall we say, because that is the cradle of civilization. There are a lot of things over there that we in the West are simply unaware of. And
I do understand that, but when you now further understand, as we go through life, our lives are so tied up with day-to-day living that many people would not have the time or the intuition to look any deeply and peel back the layers, the veneer layers of a corporate, and to understand how it works. When you're talking about a country's, an independent country who have been taken to war, who've had their infrastructure flattened, and then to see the vultures crawl in after and to asset strip it to the extent that we are now doing in Iraq by controlling and having the 70% of the profits of the oil revenue that is coming out of the ground in Iraq. Now, who are these people? Well, I've told you, I've named a few, is that they operate, our prime ministers were, I would say they have been groomed by very senior bankers to orchestrate strife and trouble throughout the world. So it's a continuation of business. And whether people say, I'm not a conspiracy theorist because all I work with is companies' house documents and the history of corporates and their directors. That's how I operate. And it can be seen quite clearly that when you lay them out on a table, you can see the filth. It's there. It's having somebody that will understand it and be brave enough in high positions of power to say enough is enough. We need to stop this before it escalates to mass wars, to which there be no benefit to the general people.
Well, once again, we find ourselves at the precipice of that very situation. So, here we go again. But I think as time moves forward and this continues to get worse and worse, and they get more and more out of control with these type of little stunts, I think more and more people are becoming sick and tired and disillusioned. And that's what I believe the tables are starting to turn, especially this year. It seems like ever since the calendar flipped over to 2015, things are changing so fast for the better. It's another thing that's blowing my mind at the moment. So there's amazing synchronicities happening. I think this naming of names, it's got to be done. Lord knows I've named my share of names when I whistle blew on what I did. So you're absolutely right. Is the point I'm reaching for here? Is people have to be brave enough to take that chance, and it may cost you a little bit here or there, but you know what? They can't kill everyone, and they can't keep everybody down.
Yes, I understand what you're saying, James. Is that I'm not scared to name names, because if this basic information was ever to be leaked to the major media, there would be an outcry of unprecedented disruption, I can call it. It would go beyond that, because especially when you're looking at this gentleman, Ambassador, or this woman, Ambassador Francis D. Cook. Because what I did was I used the ammunition markers book, which is listed in America, and I used that to deconstruct Alient Tech Systems Limited, PTY. And I found out that Alient Tech Systems is actually the 100% subsidiary of a company called Accudyne Limited, which is the 100% subsidiary of Astra Holdings, which was the company set up in the United Kingdom, which was a covert company for arms trading with Iraq and Iran. So there you have a complete system dismantlement linked to a very senior an American ambassador who has high ground with a lot of people, especially within the Bush dynasty, is to see how corporate entity, $1 billion organized crime is linked to arms trading, which is nothing unusual for when you're talking about Mr. Nixon, is to understand the mechanisms and those people who were involved with him. And that's where I uncovered this, a guy called Fred Rindle. And Fred Rindle was the old apartheid, South African apartheid military government go-between between South Africa and New York with the military government, the apartheid government, who was setting up covert black ops using an aircraft company to use those aircraft in supplying arms and munitions all over the world.
You know, this is starting to sound like the plot of The Interpreter crashing into the plot from The Peacemaker.
Well, all I can list is I can show forensic trail.
No, what I mean by that is you can't write this stuff. This is crazy.
Well, it's not
but
crazy.
not crazy. It's
real.
Yes, crazy
it's
real.
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is that there are people that are sacrificed to protect it. And I can name names on those people. There was a mining magnate in South Africa called Brett Keble, who was going to end this by going to the authorities because he was an insider. And they shot him 7 times with low-velocity rounds in an assassination to shut him up and anybody else within this syndicate who wished to open their mouths to end this madness. And I think it worked in a lot of people. It frightened those that would have been blackmailed through their perversions or whatever to continue with this syndicate. And it needs to be stopped. And I'm trying in my little way to bring this to the light of the people who can use their own intelligence on a computer and check some of the people that I've been naming. Now,
yes,
if Ambassador...
speaking of which, I think go ahead and, if you will, please name your website or sites, plural, where people can go to find these documents and things that you've been citing. I think that's absolutely imperative.
Well, I said I've made sure that I've protected the integrity of my documents, one, because I've released them on a website with a fellow friend of mine who was living in Derby. He's now moved to Australia, he said, for his own safety. But he had a web blog called Air International. And that Air International carried my research work, and we called it Pandora's Box. It was actually my thought to call it Pandora's Box, because once you opened it, you would see all these faces of politicians and senior executives and grandees coming out of it, and the loss of 3 battlefield-ready gravity-drop nuclear bombs, which also coincidentally links to a B-52 crash at Diego Garcia, from Diego Garcia, that crashed on very close to the shore near Somalia. Are you aware of that?
I was not aware of that, no.
There was an aircraft that was a B-52 that was purportedly lost with a catastrophic fire on board, where it ditched very close to the coastline in Somalia. It was en route to Diego Garcia, and it was carrying nuclear weapons in the octagonal rotation weapons bays. The quantity of which I'm not quite sure, but I believe that those weapons were covertly recovered by a guy called Conrad Billy Rautenbach, who was working with an ex-Rhodesian arms trader called John Arnold Breedenkamp. And I believe that they recovered 6 that were then onward sold to various despots. Such is organized crime. Yes, and that linked me into John Arnold Breedenkamp and Billy Rautenbach within my mining experience in South Africa, because Conrad Billy Rautenbach actually fled South Africa, having stolen quite a few vehicles from the company that he was working for in South Africa, and he fled then to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where he was put in charge of a company called Geka Mines, which was a cobalt mining operation run by the state of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And what he did, Billy Rautenbach, was he started a mineral theft ring with John Arnold Breedenkamp, and they used Billy Rautenbach's transport company to move stolen cobalt, which was part of the production of the mine, and moved it into South Africa, which was then sold to private enterprises. You're talking hundreds of millions of pounds of stolen minerals, cobalt, coltan, And this led me to, say, John Arnold Breedenkamp, who was the weapons dealer between Arms Corps in South Africa and the Conservative government and Astra Holdings in the United Kingdom. And so that led me then to a whistleblower to me who gave me the information on the covert purchase by Conservative MPs and grandees of 3 battlefield-ready gravity-drop nuclear bombs as purchased by John Arnold Breedenkamp through his agents in Arms Corps in South Africa, as part of a consignment of 9 remaining 20 kiloton battlefield-ready gravity-drop nuclear bombs as manufactured by Israeli and South African scientists back in the late 1980s. And in 1991, a young conservative politician, a young conservative trainee called David Cameron, do you know that name?
Yes.
He went, I am told, by my whistleblower to me, who is a very senior retired civil engineer and a patent holder for a transportation system, was David Cameron with a guy called Sir Kenneth Warren and Dr. David Kelly. Do you know that name?
No, I've not heard that one.
Dr. David Kelly went to Pelindaba, north of Pretoria, to orchestrate the removal and purchase of 3 of the 9 remaining 20 kiloton battlefield-ready gravity-drop nuclear bombs. And they were to be purchased covertly for the retake of Kuwait. Now, in that action, those 3 weapons were required under a UOR that if Saddam Hussein had used chemicals or bio-agents on our coalition forces in the retake of Kuwait, they would nuke Baghdad.
Interesting.
And I'm told that before the handover to the ANC communist government of Nelson Mandela, these 9 weapons were to be removed prior to the handover in 94. And so in 1991, this meeting was held and David Cameron went to Pelindaba on a freebie, which was paid by a front company of John Arnold Breedenkamp's that was set up by Arms Corps in London to pay for him and his cronies and incorporate Dr. David Kelly to go to Pelindaba to orchestrate the removal of 3 and the other 6, which were to be sent to Chicago for decommissioning, where the fissile material would be removed and sent back to South Africa so that they could do a big PR exercise to show that South Africa had rescinded its nuclear weapon production and research.
Oh, for God's sake.
I'm told this, I swear on by Almighty God, and I would swear on any Bible, that my whistleblower to me has passed me this information over 5 years. He rings me sometimes 3 times a day. We are that close. He was called and he was sent to Pelindaba to be part of this operation, the onward loading, but he refused. But he does know and have inside information on other people that were involved. Hence my telling you now, and I say so with all honesty.
Right, and so with all these names and of both people and places that you've been dropping, what would you say, just a ballpark guess, would be your estimation of a percentage of how many were persons who were doing it either through a Masonic lodge or another miscellaneous secret society, or someone who was themselves a member of a certain order or something? How often did you find that as a trend?
All the time. All the time. There were people in such high places of power within the corridors of power of Parliament and the House of Lords that as an individual who put a uniform on to defend his country, it made me sick. When I saw these people and their names popping up, it left me with no degree of confidence in the integrity or trust of any of the politicians that I've come across. And so when I found out that a lot of these people are Masons, I understood the sort of battle that would be facing me for the last 6 or 7 years at least, is
Right.
to bring this to the notice of good people throughout the world. I don't make one penny out of anything. I've never asked for one penny for all my research work. I wouldn't do that. This is not who I am inside. What I am is about trying to expose the filth that I have found that could be used and used in a court of law to bring these people to book.
Well, that's much appreciated and sympathized with, because I too am in the same boat. I've never profited one dime off what I'm doing. I give away my book. People they try to attack me at first with that whole like, oh, he's trying to do this to get rich and famous, and then that argument didn't work, and so I pressed on and hung in there, and I'm now finding a little bit of success, not in the form of monetary, but at least in platform and everything else. So, so that would be another good piece of advice for people out there, the whistleblowers, etc. Is, if you make that choice and you go down that road, then you're gonna go down a rocky road, but there is salvation you just got to hang in there, and stay safe and make good decisions and protect yourself and so forth.
Well, the way I've always worked is tell the truth, and tell the truth and show and be able to show the documentation that will show that what you're telling is the truth. The way I've tried to work it is use documents which can be used in a court of law and correspondence which you can use as evidence when you file N265 full disclosure evidence in a court of law. And this is where I believe it protects me by having that information, and then I can still go ahead and attack the people, because if they take me to court, this can all be used in the public domain to the major media, because there's the people that I'm attacking and naming are very high profile people. And once you identify the positions of power that these people hold, they wouldn't want this in the public domain. And this has been, unless you've got media like yourself, is where you're restricted to internet network radio broadcasters. Like I've been on quite a few in the United Kingdom, which have been sent all over the world. However, that doesn't give major media outlets like the BBC television worldwide network, or the ITV, or the American CBS, is that I will never get a platform on there, because the amount of names that I have within my library would cause alarm and despondency to so many people. That's not my aim. Is to bring the truth to a lot of people who can identify themselves if they just do a little bit of digging, and when they see it themselves.
My prediction for that is, I think the tides on that problem in the mainstream media will eventually change as well, and I say that with front row seats to it, working right here, surrounded by it 24/7 in Hollywood. And what I know for a fact, working in Hollywood, is that information is going to go where the dollar goes. And if the dollar goes with this new crowd of millennials who absolutely does not watch CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or the other mouthpieces of other states like BBC or whomever, yes. RT it's good, but it's the Russian state mouthpiece, so you've got to...
You think so? You think so? Well,
RT stands for Russia Today.
No.
I know there's other things, but I don't want to. That's for another. That's my point. Is oh my God, you used the analogy earlier, Pandora's box, and I think that's very appropriate, because I absolutely want to have you back, and I want to do a whole series on this and delve deeper, and because we've gone so far down the rabbit hole already just in 1 hour that
that's correct. Yeah.
It's.
I don't want to say. I don't want to confuse any of your listeners. Is that when you identify a major, I'm talking about £1 billion boiler room that controls over 500,000 shell companies. If our British intelligence service and intelligence for the Serious Fraud Office and City of London Police have walked past this building and not known of the skullduggery that emanates out of it. And I'll name it on your program. It's 788 to 790 Finchley Road, and understand from that corporate rundown, disheveled building with slanted blinds and a pile of dirty boxes and a few desks inside it, has run over 500,000 shell companies through it, which are linked to the covert arms trade, to politicians, to the BBC, to HSBC Bank. That this shell front building is Pandora's box.
Well, I think I would consider that in my book to be golden information, and on behalf of everybody listening, I sincerely thank you for it. I think you're obviously doing a tremendous service to your fellow man, as Royal Air Force should, in theory, and that's what this is all about. So we're running out of time, but if you would, please tell everybody where they can locate you on social media, locate your website addresses, etc.
Yeah, I didn't really want to be on part of Facebook, which is a social media, but anybody can find me on there. It's Gordon Bowden 2. Gordon.Bowden 2. That's in phonetics. It's a Golf Oscar Romeo Delta Oscar November full stop Bravo Oscar Whiskey Delta Echo November 2, and that's where you can find me. I'm on Facebook there, and there's a lot of people that I've tried to enlighten in the United Kingdom, and I've been on the Lou Collins radio show. I've been on. I'm going to work closely with Brian Garish of UK Column, and these are people. Sean Maguire in Ireland on his radio show called Out of the Bag, and some of my declarations of making accusations can all be backed up with forensic material. So thank you very much, James, for the invite. Really enjoyed it.
Oh yeah, no, it's been a tremendous pleasure. I'm thoroughly pleased with meeting you, and I don't believe I've ever said this before, but as a knight, one of those sir people, I salute you, sir, for your service, both back then and your service with what you're doing now. This is amazing stuff. So, thank you.
No thanks required, James. I'm just an engineer that's got a lot of patience. I'm a good fisherman, and I just hope the truth comes out. That's all I try.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it will. They can't. The truth always. I think there's an American Indian proverb, something about the seed of truth will always sprout, and so I'm botching this up horribly, but you get the idea. So
yeah, okay.
Anyway, thank you very much, and I hope to have you back very, very soon.
Thanks very much, James. I'll catch you later. Have a good evening.
Thank you. You do the same.
Pleasure. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Dial M for Nation.